What are the principles of design? Design principles are guidelines to follow if you want to create effective visuals. This pertains to anything from oil paintings to blog graphics to eye-catching social media posts to video ad bumpers to just about anything that you're going to be creating visually. Think of design as carpentry, and these principles are your toolbox. You can use them to help you during the design process. And unlike hammers, nails, and screwdrivers, they can exist entirely inside your head. These tools will give you a better understanding and appreciation of what goes into the designs we see every single day. As you become acquainted with them, you'll start to see what does and doesn't work, and you'll know why, as well as how you can apply these principles to your own creative work. So what exactly is good design? We're told that a piece of art is subjective. For the most part, that's true. But if you've ever seen an unintelligible parking sign or a website from the early days of the web, you'll know there's definitely such a thing as bad design. It's been said that good design, when it's done well, becomes invisible. It's only when it's done poorly that we notice it. That's why good design is tricky to define. Luckily for us, in the late 1970s, an influential designer named Dieter Rams saw this problem. In response, he asked himself what constituted good design, and he came up with his own list of 10 principles. These were aimed at product design, but they are still applicable to just about any design today. Rams' principles are: good design is innovative. Good design makes a product useful. Good design is aesthetic. It makes a product understandable. It's unobtrusive. It's honest. It's long-lasting. It's thorough down to the last detail. It's environmentally friendly. It's as little design as possible. The principles of design are the building blocks that graphic designers and artists use to put creative works together. The core principle of art that makes up every design, from the fine art at the Louvre to the candy bar wrapper that you like at the grocery store, to that band poster that you just got last week, or to the website you use to complete your banking, and just about every single thing you interact with. Think about it. Start to pay attention. The more you practice your design awareness, the more you can tune in to what makes something work and what doesn't. Emphasis is used to focus the viewer's attention on a certain part of a composition. The effect is achieved by manipulating elements like color, shape, and size, and this makes specific parts of a design stand out. For example, say you wanted to bring attention to a call to action on a landing page of a website. You could increase the text size and use colors that stand out from the background, emphasizing the call to action and making sure visitors don't miss it. Where objects in real life carry physical weight, elements in design carry visual weight. Large elements are heavier and small elements are lighter, with each element having its own weight based on how much attention they draw. Visual balance is about ensuring your design is equally weighted on both sides of a central point. It's kind of like a seesaw. Too much weight on either side and the whole thing becomes unbalanced. By striking this balance, you create visual harmony and stop your designs from feeling too chaotic to the viewer. It's one of the most important parts of visual composition, and it comes in 4 basic forms. At its simplest, symmetrical balance can be created with an invisible center line where the weight of the elements on both halves of the page is even. Symmetrical balance evokes feelings of formality. It's sometimes called formal balance and elegance. Asymmetrical balance results in unequal visual weight on each side of the composition. One side of the composition might contain a dominant element, which could be balanced by a couple or more lesser focal points on the other side. One visually heavy element on one side might be balanced by a handful of lighter elements on the other. Asymmetrical balance is more dynamic and interesting. It evokes feelings of modernism, movement, energy, and vitality. Asymmetrical balance offers more visual variety, although it can be more difficult to achieve because the relationships between elements are more complex. Radial balance occurs when elements radiate from a common center. Rays of sunlight and ripples in a pond after a stone is tossed are examples of radial balance. Maintaining a focal point, a fulcrum, is easy because it's always in the middle. Because everything radiates from this common center, everything also leads to the center, making it a strong point of attraction. Mosaic balance, or crystallographic balance, results from a balanced chaos. Think of Jackson Pollock paintings. The composition will lack distinct focal points, and the elements share a uniform emphasis. The lack of hierarchy leads to a visual noise at first glance. Somehow, though, it all works together. This is probably one of the most difficult balance forms to create and get right. Contrast is the most effective way to create emphasis and impact your design. Contrast is created when two elements are total opposites. For example, big and small size, classic and contemporary fonts, thin and thick lines, cool and warm colors, dark and light, smooth and rough textures, horizontal and vertical. All of these are forms of contrast. Contrast highlights elements with an effective use of color, size, shape, or other means. Contrast plays a crucial part in the organization of information on a page. It gives the reader a guide of where to look first. What is the most important point? What stands out the most? For contrast to work, it must be strong and obvious. Our eyes like contrast. Don't make differences look like a mistake. To have an impact, the difference must be obvious and extreme. When we think of movement, we think of, well, things moving, a pendulum swinging, a sport car roaring down the freeway. But in design, it refers to the path the viewer's eye takes when they look over a composition. It's not just what you look at, but it's the way you look at it. Designers can guide this by using lines, edges, shapes, and colors to create focal points that encourage certain ways of seeing. Movement can be harnessed to either distract or direct and pull the viewer's gaze around a design. You can use lines to create directional cues and make images feel more alive. The proportion principle in graphic design is one of the easiest to understand. Basically, proportion refers to the size of elements to one another in the design. Larger elements are easy to see in the design than smaller ones, and by this principle, larger elements are more important than smaller ones. Proportion is about finding harmony between two elements. You want to make sure that things look right and that the elements look as if they belong together. As you may have already guessed, repetition refers to when an element is repeated throughout a design. It could be anything, from using a certain font color to adding a repetitive pattern to a social media post. Repetition makes designs visually exciting and cohesive. It also creates a sense of consistency by using a repeating motif that the viewer comes to expect. This makes it particularly useful when it comes to creating your distinct brand identity. Repetition is a great tool to reinforce an idea that you want to transmit through your design. It also helps to unify your project. You can use the repetition principle in different elements, such as color, typefaces, shapes, or other graphic design elements. If your design has multiple typefaces or colors, it can be seen as bad design and uncomfortable to watch due to the chaos. But we can avoid this by choosing two typefaces, for example, and using them throughout the design. The rhythm principle is easy to understand by using music as an example. When you use repeating elements in your design, you create spaces between the elements, and this creates a visual rhythm. There are a few different types of rhythm. Random rhythm is repeating elements without any regular interval. Regular rhythm is when elements are of a similar size and length and spread out over predictable intervals. Flowing rhythm is natural patterns where the intervals are organic, like a tiger's stripe or a bunch of flowers in a garden. and progressive rhythm is a gradual change or sequence of elements that change over a series of clear steps. This would be something like a color gradient, for example. Rather than letting the viewer's eyes settle on a focal point, rhythm encourages viewers to move their eyes across the entire piece, following the lines and forms to their natural endpoints. It's something you see reflected across nature and works of art. Visual hierarchy is about organizing the value of elements within your design. By ranking information from most important to least important, you make it easy for the viewer to digest your content. The viewer's eyes should be drawn to the most important element first. These sit atop the throne of the visual hierarchy, with the elements laid out below ranked in order of importance. There are a number of visual tricks to influence this flow, including size and scale, in which the larger an element, it is the more likely a viewer is to see it. By making something smaller, you can reduce its importance and put emphasis somewhere else. Color and contrast. A splash of color makes a huge difference. Use bright colors to make certain elements or information pop. You can use different typefaces and stylizations like italics or bold to draw the eye and move text higher or lower on the hierarchy. White space will enable you to give an element breathing room and make a central element stand out. Hierarchy refers to the importance of elements within a design. The most important element should appear at the most important place, and vice versa. Pattern in graphic design refers to a repetition of multiple graphical elements on your design that work together to create an eye-catching and harmonious design. People tend to get confused between repetition and patterns, which is understandable as they both deal with repeating elements, but the similarities really end there. While repetition occurs when the same elements are repeated throughout a design, a pattern is composed of different components that are repeated in the same way. Think of the way gift wrapping is usually made up of a few different repeating elements. That's a pattern. The pattern principle is also referred to how design elements are laid out in a project and set a standard on it so that it easily communicates your ideas. As a general rule, it's best to use colors, textures, and shapes to create patterns. Try to avoid doing so with words. It tends to just give people headaches. Despite the occasional bright color or wacky design, the key to creating effective patterns is simplicity. As you can see here, these pages are all slightly different, but the established pattern of key elements identifies them as all part of the same website. White space is also known as negative space, and it refers to the area of a design that is empty and does not include design elements. But white space is actually a really important design element. You need to give your design elements space to breathe and easily differentiate them from other elements. The region between different design elements is referred to as negative or white space. This is part of the design that doesn't contain anything. No images, drawings, shiny colors, or text, nothing. The name is a little misleading. It's not a negative thing, and it doesn't have to be white. It can be any color. White space refers to what you don't add. It's the empty parts around and within your design. It's one of the fundamental building blocks of design, and it's just as important as any element that you do include. Two other things to consider are variety and harmony. Variety creates visual interest in a design, and it can be created via typography, color, images, texture, and virtually any other design element. Variety keeps things engaging. It stops designs from being stagnant, predictable, and downright boring, all the things you want to avoid. By making sure elements are varied, you stop designs from feeling monotonous and uninspired. Creating visual interest will keep viewers engaged with your design. Holding their attention and guiding them through the composition will create a powerful user experience. Variety adds something interesting to the composition in order to create contrast and tension. The easiest way to do this is through juxtaposition and contrast. Place bright colors next to lighter hues, text next to images, and round shapes next to square ones. By doing so, you can keep viewers engaged and your design interesting. You could also try mixing organic shapes with geometric shapes. This also adds variety. The concept should reinforce the message you are trying to communicate in your design. Otherwise, it can look pointless. It's important to understand when you use the variety principle, you need to be very careful by not overloading your design and creating chaos. The unity principle refers to how well all the elements used in your design project work together. They should have a clear relationship and communicate the same concepts. This will ensure that your design looks more organized and every element on it will be related to each other. These design principles must be known by every designer, and now you can implement these principles into your designs and practice using them. This will help all your design projects look better and communicate easily your ideas. Once you have mastered all 12 principles, you can start to play with them and use them to create unique designs and creative ways to communicate your ideas throughout any of your projects.